Hello, I'm Marcia Cavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, this was one of those weeks when one story so dominated the news that most all else seemed secondary. We'll be looking at the Texas tragedy in light of past incidents in Louisiana, plus a reporter's perspective from having covered a massacre and reactions from lawmakers. In addition, we will look at expansion plans for the aquarium, keeping up with the legislature, and a disagreement over feeding the alligators. Joining us are tonight's Informed Sources, Errol Laborde, producer of Informed Sources, Tyler Bridges, reporter, the Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate, Curt Sprang, news anchor and reporter, WGNO-TV Channel 26, and Tony McAuley, reporter, the Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate. We'll go over to E first because you wanted to sort of reflect on this very tragic week, what happened in Texas followed, the week before that was an incident in Buffalo, New York. Taking a look at what Louisiana has endured.
Louisiana has endured much. I mean, there have been multiple shooting incidents in Louisiana. And I understand there's new figures that come out today that show it among the leaders in the country in that category. But out of all the multiple shootings, there were just two that come to mind. And I was thinking of them in terms of political reactions. The one, and I guess the most infamous, took place on January 7th, 1972, and that was the sniping incident at the Howard Johnson Hotel downtown. The violence had started like the day before when the person who was the sniper had also killed a couple of people at the garage at the police station. And then that Sunday, he went up to the top of to the top floors of the Howard Johnson Hotel and gradually worked himself upstairs and started shooting out the windows. Before it was over, he would kill 5 policemen, and policemen seemed definitely to be one of his targets. It was part racial and part police, and the two combined. There were 11 serious injuries and another couple. So it was just really tragedy. It was one of these things that the whole nation was watching. I mean, all TV stopped that day, other than to be transferred and people to see what was going on.
Of course, this was right downtown New Orleans, too. The Howard Johnson at that time was right near City Hall.
It was right downtown. In fact, I mean, City Hall was in the firing line of it. One of the TV stations at the time was located at the place where it could conceivably just drag one of its cameras on the street and show some of the incident. But of course, all this had to be done in a hurry. But one thing I remember, I mean, there was so much to that incident. But one thing I remember when I was looking at the coverage this week and hearing the political responses to it, was that later that evening there was a very prominent elected official in Louisiana, not the governor, but somebody else, who that night went on television and said that he was sending a telegram to the United States Attorney's Office because he had evidence that this was part of a nationwide conspiracy. So here was this person, I mean, an elected official, saying about evidence of a nationwide conspiracy. And of course, this was during those rugged Vietnam era days when everybody was sort of on edge. There were all things going on. And for that person to say that, which proved not to be true, I mean, ultimately it proved to be one person acting alone who was eventually shot down by a Marine helicopter flying over. There were 200 bullet wounds in him, but it was one person. But I just thought that was just, and I understand the fear, but people need to be careful and need to get their facts about those kind of things, because it could have caused rioting in the streets. I mean, it could have had a spillover that went nationwide, if this guy's saying that there's a nationwide conspiracy. But the other was more recent, and this was in July of 2015 in Lafayette at a movie theater. And thinking about this, there are probably a lot of people right now are saying, oh yeah, I remember that, I've forgotten about that. And it wasn't that long ago, but they've become so common, they're easy to forget. But this was one night, a guy went in, he bought his tickets, he sat down, and then as the movie started, he began shooting. He injured 11 people, and he killed 2 of the moviegoers. And just randomly, all the reports for that, he'd planned this, he had his weapons, he shot slowly, he took aim and just went after people. Then ultimately he shot himself in the head. And what I recall most about that night, about the coverage, is that Governor Jindal, this was at the time when Governor Jindal was running for president, and so he was on the road a lot, but that night he happened to be in Baton Rouge. And so when he was in Baton Rouge, he came to Lafayette. And, Lafayette's not that far from Baton Rouge, especially if you're the governor in a state police van. And so he was there in about an hour. He talked to the state police chief and announced that he told the state police chief to do whatever you need to do to catch this person. Well, by that time, the person was already dead. And you really don't need to tell the state police chief to try to apprehend a criminal. So I'm not sure if that was a bold, decisive action. But then when the press started to ask him the kind of questions you expect to be asked about the type of weapon that he was used, do we need any kind of new laws, how about laws dealing with insanity, Jindal kept on answering, our thoughts and prayers go out to the victims and their families. I don't want to talk politics. He kept on dismissing these issues as being politics over and over. And he would not, and I can understand he couldn't give a decisive answer that night, but I think he could have given a little respect to the severity of these issues and not just say it's just politics. And the fact that he thought of it as just politics at a time when he was running for president and perhaps thinking about the Republican nomination was a little disappointing. So those are just two instances that came to mind in the way that political people reacted to them. Now, of course, there's always been many political people who've tried to do the right thing and who are very self-conscious, but I just wanted to mention those two.
All righty. Right now, we're going to go over to Curt, because as a reporter, you were working in Texas and you actually covered a mass shooting that happened how long ago?
This was in October of 1991. It was, in fact, a slow news week. And you want to talk about ironies. Back in the days when you used to actually get your TV fixed, nowadays people just get new ones. But back in the days when you would actually take a TV to the repair shop, mine was on the blink. It was a slow week. I said, let me take it in the shop. I won't need it much this week, even as a reporter. And after I just dropped it off in the repair shop on this police scanner on the news unit that I was in, we heard about a hostage situation at the Luby's cafeteria in Killeen, Texas. And by the time I got there, it went from hostage situation to the hostage taker was dead, and then some people who were there at the scene telling me, it looks like we're going to have 8 people. I'm hearing 8 people killed. And then the police chief called us all over. And keep in mind, we're young reporters. It's a small market. And he said to us, we're going to have at least 20 dead. And in fact, it was 23. You could have knocked us all over with a feather. But the stories that came out of that, the stories of survival and even some legislative moves as well. It was a frightening string of days. You learned a lot about what's in the mind of somebody who does something like that. It was the first time I'd ever heard the word Glock. That was one of the pistols that was used that we've heard so much about since then. And then you talk to survivors, people who were shot and survived. One was a minister who had the gunman stand directly over him and aim right at his head and pull the trigger and missed him. But he did previously shoot him in the back, and so he was hospitalized at the time. I'll always remember, he told me, he said, Curt, collect people. Just collect people. Just have people in your life. And that was one of the things that he appreciated, having survived that and losing friends who were there with him at the time.
And of course, that was one of the earliest mass shootings in this nation, only to be followed, by Virginia Tech several years later?
Virginia, it was the worst mass shooting in the nation until Virginia Tech, I think about 15 or 16 years later. But it was awful, and there were another 20 people who were injured as well. And the cafeteria reopened, and now it's not a cafeteria, it's some other restaurant, I believe, there. But it also led to, we talk about legislative moves, a woman who was there and escaped, but her parents were both killed by the gunman. She became a state representative in Texas and led the effort to allow people to conceal carry handguns legally, because she had a handgun in her car at the time but did not bring it in the restaurant because she did not want to break the law.
And when you think you went through this 15-year gap, now there's this fear that we're getting into this era of copycat crimes. Was what happened in Texas influenced by what happened in Buffalo. And in fact, I remember the Lafayette Theater incident that past week. There had been a verdict handed down on a similar incident in Denver 3 years earlier, and the verdict had come down. So it had been in the news about a movie theater killer. And so you just fear if these things, especially with all the media out there now, are just quickly influencing other copycat ideas.
Just way, way, way too many of these that we could sit here and talk about. I mean, that's just so jarring. And Tyler, it's going over to you. And you're around the politicos a lot, the policymakers, the lawmakers. What kind of scuttlebutt are you hearing from them? What kind of reaction?
Well, the first thing I wanted to say was what Errol was talking about after the shooting in Lafayette, and the expressions of thoughts and prayers are with the victims. You know, we've seen that again after the Texas shooting. I saw a sort of a different version of that in a statement by Senator John Kennedy in Washington. Said he wished he could go hug his son, but he's not calling for any specific changes in federal legislation. Then on the state level, you know, this is a state with permissive gun laws where if you're not a supporter of the Second Amendment, you're not going to get elected to statewide office. You know, John Bel Edwards is a Democrat, but he's also pro-guns and talks about how he goes hunting and maybe he bagged a deer or something like that. And in the legislature last year, the legislature did pass a bill that would allow people to get, like Curt was talking about this, the conceal permit, but they would no longer have to go through the training or get that permit if they were over 21 years old. And Governor Edwards actually vetoed that bill, and then the legislature tried to override him and just fell short. Now there's another effort, this time by State Representative Danny McCormick, who we've heard about most recently is a supporter of a very, very strict anti-abortion bill. Well, he's also got he's come back with a similar bill to what Governor Edwards vetoed last year. This bill is House Bill 37, if anybody wants to look it up. And it's passed the House, it's now before the Senate, but again, it would be similar, that people would be able to not have to have a concealed permit with that one, and again, the training that's required. But I've talked to legislators in the last several days, including some of the pro-gun rights legislators, and certainly people were shocked by what happened in Texas. And even one pro-gun legislator, Blake Miguez, was having trouble keeping his composure when he was talking to a reporter about this. So I think it's caused legislators to sort of take pause and wonder, but I don't think things are going to change. I'm guessing that this pro-gun legislation will go forward. Maybe not McCormick's, perhaps only because he's not well liked in the House and the Senate. But again, this is a pro-gun state, and you know, people who are not happy about that, anybody who's watching it, my question to them would be, well, have you written your state representative or state senator, or do you even know who they are, to let them know your views and what you want the legislature to do on guns? Because the pro-gun lobby is very well organized, and those people turn out and vote.
So if this constitutional carry legislation is passed, will the governor sign it?
We never know this. He doesn't tell us in advance. Again, we know from last year he did veto it, and maybe he would have even more reason to veto it this year. Of course, he would not want to be overridden, as he was able to stave off that last year. So it's a little too early to know.
Okay.
But the legislative session ends soon, so
Right.
the week that's coming will decide this.
All right, Tyler, thanks a lot. All right, we're going to go on over to Tony now and talk about a little bit happier subject, and that is our aquarium and also the insectarium that was closed down, but it's coming back.
Yeah, that was, I think a lot of people were worried a couple of years ago, right at the worst part of the pandemic, when the Audubon Institute, which relies for revenue, about 90% of its revenue on visitors, was in really dire straits at the time, and they announced that they were closing down the much beloved insectarium on Canal. So the good news is that it's coming back bigger and better. It's going to be at the downriver end of what everyone knows as the aquarium now. That was a space that was occupied by the IMAX Theater, which is kind of dated technology, so that's been gutted out of there, and they're going to put this brand spanking new insectarium in about 17,000 square foot of space there. So what people can expect as the big difference is that the entrance to the aquarium is going to be moved downriver about 30 yards or so. There's going to be a big 60-foot tall glass entranceway there. And when you go through there, you're going to go through and go into a room that on the right is called the WOW room. That's going to be a sort of interactive digital insect experience where butterflies will move as you move your hand, that sort of thing. And that takes you into the insectarium on the right, the downriver side, and then to your left you'll go into the old aquarium, which is going to get a facelift of its own. So the things that will be there that people will remember is like bug appetit, where you get to sample some of the, you know, delicious worms and ants and
crickets
Wait,
all of that.
Tony, have you tried that stuff?
I have not, Tyler.
Have you, Tyler?
I'm not that brave.
Have you had
I
it?
have not, but I did have some bugs once in Ecuador.
I'm sure they were luscious.
But you know, I think the
forward to that.
insectarium is in a better location too. It had been in the old custom house, which historically is a fascinating building, but it's not a tourist attraction sort of building. And so to be put alongside the aquarium, I think is a good move.
Yeah, and I think the fact that they have less actual, you know, they're occupying less actual space overall in the new place, but have significantly more display space. I think that is testament to the restrictions of the old 19th century building that they were in before. And they're going to, the butterfly experience, which was one of the things that people used to love, it's going to be a different kind of experience now. They actually bring the room in, so the butterflies will land on people. It's going to be more of an intimate experience than the other room, which was big and impressive, but you know, people were a little bit far away from the actual Lepidoptera.
Oh, you know, and kids, you know, old and young kids, I should say, huh? Really love that insectarium. I know my grandchildren really, really enjoyed it. They just love seeing all those critters, all those bugs. Really enjoyed the butterfly space there in the old insectarium. So I'm looking forward to seeing what this new butterfly space will be like.
But I regret I regret the loss of the IMAX theater. That could be fun sometime to see that.
I should say actually that, well, the IMAX theater goes out and it wasn't doing that great. It's just technology that for the purpose had gone away. But one of the things going in there is a big event space on the lower part of that, which will abut onto Waldenberg Park, and that should be a revenue earner for you know what is a publicly owned operation there. So.
And there's going to be a place for parakeets too. Is there a parakeet?
Yeah,
area?
in the aquarium, there one of the enhancements there is the Amazon section, which they are going to bring in a lot more birds in general, and also they're upgrading the Mississippi section, and there's going to be a new feature where people can kind of look down on from above on some of the water features in the aquarium.
So has the work started on this yet, Tony?
Yeah. Yeah, they've started. It's a $41 million project. The insect side of it is just a blank space, and they're going to do it in such a way that they don't want to close down the aquarium at all, and then they expect the whole thing to be finished next summer sometime.
All right, that's something to look forward to. Thanks a lot, Tony. All right, Tyler, let's go on back over to you because other stuff is happening in these waning days of this legislative session, and something that kind of sparked up is what's happening over at what's called the Pentagon, the barracks.
Right. Yeah, the Pentagon barracks is a historic building from the 19th century. It's catty corner from the state capitol, 2 stories. There's a bunch of apartments there that legislators have long rented. They rent it for the full year, but they stay there when the legislature is in session. The Speaker of the House, his name is Clay Scheck-Snyder. He's a Republican from Gonzales. He gets 2 apartments there, and my colleague Sam Carlin and I learned that when the State Division of Administration was working on remodeling his apartment after it had been flooded, that Scheck-Snyder, the Speaker, again, basically fired the contractor hired by the state, brought in his stepsons to finish the job. The stepsons billed the state for $48,000. Scheck-Snyder's wife ended up bringing in appliances. I guess it's good to point out that they were high-end appliances.
I.e. expensive.
Yeah, i.e. expensive in these apartments at the Pentagon. And so Sam Carlin and I wrote a story for The Advocate about that, and did cause something of a brouhaha.
So it caused a brouhaha, but is there going to be any sort of repercussions, either political or even legal?
Well, we don't know what legal repercussions there could possibly be. I don't think there are any political repercussions. The Speaker of the House only has one more year. And just so people understand, the Speaker of the House is a big deal. He gets to decide who's on each committee, decides which bills come up every day. It's hard to go against the Speaker, but certainly legislators, both Democrats and Republicans, have spoken to me privately and who do not like the Speaker and say that it was an important story to write, given that many people do think he abused taxpayer dollars or his own dollars. It's not clear exactly how he paid for all of this.
So once he's no longer Speaker, does he have access to these apartments?
No, he's Speaker for basically through the end of 2023 when there are new elections, and then he's term limited. He wants to run for Lieutenant Governor, by the way. He also has a bill that would put the Pentagon barracks and several other buildings in the Capitol complex under the aegis of the Lieutenant Governor, and people think that that may be one reason why he's going against the state agency that oversees it today.
And so how is that legislation moving along, or is it?
Well, as I said, it's hard to go against the Speaker because he has so much power, so that's moving forward. But the state official who oversees day-to-day operations of the government has been quite critical, saying this is a really bad plan. And so if it does pass, again, this is the final week of the legislative session, Governor John Bel Edwards could veto that legislation.
Okay, so in this final week, what are some other hot items up for consideration or final passage, or maybe they've already passed, like the transgender legislation that did pass, right?
Yeah, the transgender bill, folks may remember that passed last year. It would basically target transgender athletes from participating in high school sports. And the bill passed last year. The governor vetoed it. And there was an effort led by Speaker Schexnayder to override the governor, something that had not happened since 1991. And last year's effort on that bill barely failed. But the bill is back. It's very similar to last year, passed overwhelmingly in both the House and the Senate. So we're going to see whether the governor, what he does. He has three choices. He could sign the bill into law, he could veto it again, or he could simply let the bill become law without his signature.
Okay, and once again, no inkling from him as to what direction he's going to move.
No inkling.
Okay. All righty, Tyler, thanks a lot. Let's go back on over to Curt right now. And we're hearing, well, I mean, we always hear about alligators. We live in Louisiana, for goodness sake, southeast Louisiana. But we heard about one pretty big guy that was there at the municipal yacht harbor that had to be taken care of.
Well, it was a concern that so many people have had who live in the West End, and that is that an alligator attacked someone. Now, it was a diver who was working on a dock, but and it may have been more of a bump than an actual bite, but people are concerned that this illustrates the problem, and that is that the alligators are being fed by people, and they're not afraid of people and are approaching them. And it's not exactly a new issue. We at WGNO News did a story months ago on the concerns and all the video and the photos that people have of the alligators coming near the docks, coming near the boats. And the state legislature is trying, or has tried, unsuccessfully on multiple years, to try to pass some sort of legislation to make it illegal in the state to feed alligators in the wild. But at Texas you can't, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, all of the Gulf Coast states you cannot feed alligators in the wild. But in Louisiana you can. Once again, this session, a bill, House Bill 541, I think, it failed once again because there just wasn't enough support to even get it out of committee. And as far as locally, could maybe New Orleans pass some sort of a law to perhaps prohibit people from feeding the alligators in the West End? There doesn't seem any real support right now. There are any indication that it's on the radar of people. But the concern is when these gators come so close to the docks and to the boats that it's going to be somebody's pet, or it's going to be somebody next time that gets bitten, and maybe even more severely than what happened just this past week.
Well, Curt, is it possible to take any of those gators that might get caught at the West End and take them over to the new aquarium that they're expanding that Tony was talking about?
It sounds like the digs there would be fantastic for them.
And they definitely would have a very good, healthy diet.
As I understand, they did remove the one, and humanely remove the one in question, or at least went looking for him at some point this week. But, you know, there's no shortage of them. If you remove one, I don't understand how that really does much for more than a week or two until more move in.
Are we seeing the alligators going to move in closer to populated areas
But
right
that's
now?
just that along the West End, whether people bring food there or whether you buy food there are all kinds of opportunities for people to go, oh, look at an alligator, let me throw him whatever I'm eating, and they get accustomed to that, and they're not afraid of it. I saw some video of somebody just throwing a rock in the water, and he hit the water, and all of a sudden an alligator came out of nowhere to come over to see what it was. And you think, wow, I hope that's not a kid. I hope that's not somebody's pet next time.
Yeah, and I mean, once again, this is their terrain. This is where they live. And once again, I'll refer to my grandchildren. They love to go out to the Bonneville Boat Launch. There's a wonderful dog park there for their dogs. But they've also seen an alligator there in that area by the little bridge there. I mean, they are around. Tourists also, when they come to town, they want to see a gator.
And they love to see
see
them being fed. And the tour boat companies like it to be legal for them to feed those alligators. So there's a real push from each side to try to get something done. But it looks like Louisiana is going to remain the only state that allows the feeding of wild alligators.
Okay, so don't feed the gators.
Don't
All right,
do it,
guys.
folks.
All righty, other stories. E, let's go back over to you.
Two of the most cherished cultural names locally are coming together this weekend, Zulu and Oxnard. They're having a health fair this weekend for all the members and just going down the list of all the possible maladies and giving people a chance to be checked.
All righty. Tony, let's go to you.
We did a story midweek about a businessman called Anthony Murillo who owns a lot of apartment buildings around the city, who was suing the Sewage and Water Board for putting what he said were disputed bills in for collections and tanking his credit score. Today he got an injunction from the court so that they have to reverse that, and that could have some broader implications for how the Sewage and Water Board has to deal with these many, many thousands of disputed bills that are chronic.
Okey-doke. Tyler, over to you.
Yeah, I think the big story in the final week of the legislative session, again, the session ends on June 6th, will be whether John Bel Edwards, the governor, vetoes or line item vetoes individual spending projects, and then whether the legislature will try to override him on that. This is kind of new territory for the legislature.
Okay. Curt?
We've seen gas prices above $4 and then dip down below. If you are planning on going anywhere, AAA is telling everybody for the foreseeable future, for the rest of the summer, budget on at least $4 a gallon. Do not expect a break anytime soon.
Oh, that's painful. Okay, thanks a lot, guys, for being here, and thank you all for joining us. We will see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.